welcome everyone. Today we have a very timely program. We're honored to have Professor Georgy Toloraya, who's currently the Director of Korean Research at the Institute of Economics at the Russian Academy of Social Sciences. And Stephen Noerper, our Director of Policy, will moderate this conversation. So we'll have a Q&A after this as well. So the floor is yours, Stephen, and Professor Toloraya.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you all for coming. We're delighted to have you here. And we'd like to thank those who are joining us online or listening via podcast or watching via YouTube video. We are absolutely thrilled to have Georgy Toloraya with us today. He wears several hats, including that, as mentioned by Tom, with the Russian Academy of Sciences, the Institute of Economics, as Director of Korean Research. He has served in both North Korea and South Korea and headed the Russian Foreign Ministry's efforts as Director of the Department for Korean Peninsular Affairs, and has a long and illustrious diplomatic as well as scholarly and analytical background. He is well respected internationally for his thoughts and inputs and has traveled prominently to different venues, most recently in Hanoi. And he seems always on a plane. He was just in Vienna, and he has flown in just for this for us here today. He joined us this morning for a session with senior United Nations professionals to discuss some of these aspects in detail. And the timing, as President Byrne has indicated, is really ideal given the news cycle and the meeting that has just taken place between Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un. Some people have said that was good luck. While it is good luck, we also planned it that way. We plan here about 5 or 6 months in advance. And at the time that we planned this part of the calendar, Kim Jong-un had just met for a fourth time with Xi Jinping. And while some of the recommendation might have been, we'll do the China program now, we said, no, really, I think within the first 5 months, we'll have a meeting between Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un. So I'm glad that effort at forethought by our team has paid off, and I'm delighted that Georgy has been able to come in for this, and he heads out back to Moscow tonight. And so thank you for taking the time, and we look forward to your insights on this. And perhaps that mention of Xi and Kim and now Putin and Kim says something about a process, says something about North Korea's quest for strategic diversification, says something about a role for Russia that may be different from that portrayed widely in the popular press, and maybe more nuanced and well worthy of our audience's understanding and input.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Steve. Most of you are here because Putin has met Kim Jong-un just a couple of weeks ago. And this highlighted Russian role in Korean affairs, which is, well, normally either neglected or forgotten. Because the critics say supposedly Russia has no leverage over North Korea and not an important actor in solving the issue of Korea or North Korean denuclearization. That's not fully true because Russia has a leverage, and that leverage is based not that much on economy as Chinese leverage is, but on deep historical links between the elites of two countries and the fact that North Koreans see Russians as less suspicious among all the foreigners. All foreigners are enemies of North Korea, but Russians are the least of them. So that gives a room for our constant exchange of ideas and cooperation, not in terms of any kind of big economic projects, but on discussing political and security issues, as well as Russian soft power in North Korea, which is still quite formidable. However, over the last several years, we didn't use the most efficient mechanism, the most efficient tool for our relations. This is summit diplomacy. In North Korean system, summit diplomacy, summit meeting is not just one of the diplomatic tools, but it is the absolute has absolute value because this is the way all the problems may be solved, and without such a contact, nothing much can happen on the working level. Kim was expected in Russia, in fact, since 2015. He was invited to take part in the celebration of the Victory Day in May 2015. But due to internal reasons, not out of disrespect for Russia, he couldn't come, although he intended. He also couldn't come for the Eastern Economic Forums, where he was invited last year, 2018, because in September, when the forum was held in Vladivostok, he was preoccupied by celebrating the 7th anniversary of his country. He just simply couldn't make it. So that gave rise to suspicion that Kim is not a very high esteem of Russia, that he disrespects Russia, and I've seen a lot of critical articles on that. However, it turned out to be to the better, because when the meeting finally happened, it happened in a very important moment. The moment when the diplomatic process between North Korea and the United States, as all other diplomacy with North Korean participation, has stalled. We're in the impasse. And now Russia is trying to really play some positive role to produce some good influence on the parties to restart the diplomatic process. So that was the most important outcome and the reason for Putin and Kim meeting. Of course, Kim wanted to give to the world the impression that he has a diversified support base, that he is not only China to rely on, but also Russia, to make maybe China a little jealous. But of course, Russia and Chinese cooperation on Korean affairs is very tight, and if Kim wanted to play a Russian card, that was not successful. If we ask what's Russian role in Korean affairs, is it positive or negative? Is it positive from U.S. Point of view, from Chinese point of view, from North Korean point of view? Is it negative? Well, most parties agree that it's positive. From U.S. point of view, Russia is mostly on the same page with the U.S. in what concerns denuclearization, in what concerns sanction regime, in what concerns further steps towards North Korea. Of course, Russia do not fully agree to that, because we have some differences. We don't think that sanctions by itself will solve the issue. We think that the North Korean issue could be solved only on the phased approach basis, on a step-by-step, action-for-action basis, not in a big deal way. And there's a lot of the need for lots of diplomacy and lots of patience to develop the kind of trust and cooperation between U.S. and North Korea to reach any goal. But this is where Russia wants to assist. In fact, Kim Jong-un, when he met Putin in Vladivostok, he asked to deliver a sort of message to President Trump, to U.S. side, of how he sees the future process of denuclearization talks. I wouldn't say that it would be much pleasant to U.S. to hear, because what Kim has in mind is exactly what I've said. There's the phase-by-phase process, and I think he believes that now the ball is on the U.S. court, and unless U.S. changes its position by the end of the year, he will try what he calls a new way. Of course, Russia tries to dissuade him from this, because for Russia, actually stability in the neighboring region is the most important priority. That's, to be frank, it's even more important than immediate denuclearization, which is not possible as we think. So, this was discussed in the summit, and also Putin suggested that any kind of security guarantees that could be found adequate by North Koreans, which is the condition for their giving up nuclear potential, should be multilateral and based on international law. That means that Russia, China, as well as South Korea and Japan, and UN should play a crucial role in not only providing that kind of guarantees, but also in monitoring and guaranteeing, keeping them in place. And North Koreans seem to share this point of view, although, of course, still so much has to be done on the bilateral track between US and North Korea to get to the point where multilateral format would be needed. Kim also wanted to get some kind of economic agenda from Russian side. Looks like he thinks that there is a possibility for Russia to have more, to give him more assistance in economy. Of course, we are giving humanitarian assistance, for example, food aid through the World Food Program and bilateral as well, but it is not very big, although we're still the principal donor of North Korea in this humanitarian area. But it could be, it could get bigger. We cannot really do much in bilateral projects because of sanctions. North Koreans do understand that, and they understand that Russia will always keep the sanctions because it undersigned the relevant resolutions of the United Nations Security Council. However, there are some things that can be done without breaking the sanctions regime. For example, certain goods which are not sanctioned might be traded bilaterally without even involving the transfers of funds on a sort of clearing basis or barter basis, and that's what was discussed. North Korea wants a bridge to be built finally between Russia and North Korea in much of a symbolic gesture. We have only a railroad bridge, but no automobile bridge between Russia and North Korea, while China has maybe 15 or something like that. If we speak about the outcome of Putin's meeting, Kim, the most important thing that this meeting happened, and that the contact was established. As eyewitnesses said, there was a sort of personal chemistry between Putin and Kim Jong-un, which, nobody expected, in fact, to appear. And that's important in the North Korean system because now we have much more influence in giving advice and discussing things in North Korea. And this is something other countries can also use. I have mentioned that we have very good cooperation with South Korea, with China on Korean issues. Actually, we have developed a roadmap together with China, which was publicized in 2017, July 4th, Independence Day. So it was publicized on a three-phase approach: freeze for freeze, then bilateral negotiation, then multilateral format. In fact, what's happening over this couple of years is happening in exact accordance with this map, although nobody remembers it. And we are also developing a new suggestions the continuation, for the practical steps on this roadmap. We also succeeded with China to have a trilateral mechanism involving North Koreans to be a part of consultation with participation of China and Russia, which was unprecedented for many years. Speaking about South Korea, current Moon Jae-in administration is, I think that the one which positions are most close to Russians with respect to inter-Korean relations and situation in Korean Peninsula. We are much more in sync with any of the previous administrations, starting from Kim Dae-jung, Roh Moo-hyun era. And we support inter-Korean rapprochement and cooperation, and we do hope that that could also give possibility to implement trilateral projects with North-South Korea participation, such as a railroad connection, gas pipeline, electrical grid connections. But of course, that could only happen when the sanctions are lifted or relieved, and when the denuclearization process would continue. And coming to U.S., Korean issue is one of the few where Russia and U.S. can cooperate. We are at odds, in fact, unfortunately, on most of the other international issues, be it Middle East, Ukraine, or whatever. But in Korean case, our positions are very close. And this is something we try to capitalize on. Current administration has introduced a sort of constant, regular consultation basis on the level of vice ministers and special representatives, which are, I think, very useful, not only for exchanging opinion, but also for working out some joint approaches. And I think that these possibilities will only increase after Putin-Kim Jong-un meeting, because now we have a direct channel to deliver some ideas and to not to mediate, but to create conditions to facilitate the dialogue between North Korea and the United States. And I do hope that this kind of cooperation can become a few of success stories in Russia-American relations, which is important for our both countries and for the future of the world as is.
Yeah, it's well worth underscoring, because on so many other fronts, Ukraine and Syria, et cetera, there appears to be a real chasm in U.S.-Russia relations. But this does seem to be a part of the world where there is a real opportunity for cooperation, even if strategic interests may differ over time, at least in terms of the commitment to denuclearization. And China as well. I know you have mentioned a cooperative aspect of China, the United States, and Russia together on that, which provides a different kind of mini-lateral reality. So interesting, and we appreciate your underscoring that. And also the receptivity to Moon Jae-in and this push forward and the peace offensive that he has very publicly said in speeches talking about the common rail corridor and the ability to transition people and goods from Seoul to St. Petersburg is very much a reality, and that has been brought up by prior presidents as well. A question for you is in terms of your belief in North Korea's real willingness to denuclearize, and where Russia may be of some assistance in terms of helping them with the process of understanding better nuclear doctrine, arms control, confidence building, and that may be an area where Russia can provide real inputs that reinforce U.S. and South Korean interests.
Well, speaking about the possibility of North Korean denuclearizations, I think it's rather more a matter of belief rather than, well, analysis. Because some people believe in it, some people do not. And we have no way to check unless it happens. But when and how it happens, no one knows. One thing I know, that North Koreans have expressed the willingness to move along this path, and they think that this is enough to get some concession from their opponents. Well, U.S. thinks that's first they should denuclearize, get rid of their nuclear weapons, and then they'll get some goodies. Then they get some kind of response. Speaking frankly, I don't think that this is a practical approach. The North Korean nuclear program is a really big thing. It's something which includes hundreds, if not thousands, of different objects, units, projects, and to inspect them all, to dismantle. And, dismantling a nuclear reactor is not the same as blowing up an old building. It's quite a laborious process. This would demand a lot of time, years, if not decades, I think, and lots of money. Billions of dollars, and who's going to pay? So just saying that first, for a dozen years, we will deal with this laborious process, and then you may get something, is simply not practical. The approach can be, I think, only step by step, and it's only through this process that we may learn, will North Korea denuclearize finally or not. But every step we take down this road diminishes the nuclear potential of North Korea, diminishes their ability to attack other countries, including the United States, diminishes the danger of nuclear proliferation, diminishes the danger of new war in Korea and in Asia, and it also increases the opportunities for cooperation and trust building. Therefore, I think we all should believe in final denuclearization for many reasons. And it should be stated as a goal. By the way, in accordance with NPT Treaty, the denuclearization of the whole world is also stated as a goal. But no one expects it to happen anytime soon. So we should put it as a slogan and move towards this, doing all we can do to solve the issues I have now mentioned. But I think we should not be conditional that unless North Korea denuclearizes, nothing else will happen, because this would only lead to increase in their nuclear and missile potential, and maybe increased their hostilities by using other weapons, and I've mentioned here like cyber weapons. So the thing is to diminish this hostility. The thing is to diminish their nuclear and missile potential by giving some concessions, by giving some mutual steps in the process of that diplomatic tit-for-tat exchanges.
Thanks, Georgy. I would note before we turn to your questions that Professor Toloraya has a piece up, I think today, in 38 North, if you'd like to check that out.
That's not me.
But I know many of you are fans of that. So we have an audience that's primarily made up of our friends from different corporate and business interests, as well as a contingency here from Columbia University and several people from the United Nations. We'd like to turn early to you because I know you have good questions in this area. And so if you'll please just state your name and affiliation so that we can have that. Please, John.
John Koch, I'm a political historian. It's interesting that you mentioned that Russia and America could cooperate because they had an opportunity after the Second World War, and we know the outcome. You mentioned that security assurances. I'm just wondering if you've given any thought or are aware of more specifics in terms of what Russia's prepared to do, and what about a multilateral approach? You mentioned China, Russia, and the U.S., because if you go back to the Singapore communique, there's a commitment to denuclearization. There's also a commitment to a stable and lasting peace regime, which would have to be supported by security assurances. So I've been trying to find out specifically what kinds of security assurances do you envisage? Thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's a good question because that's what I should have said by myself, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. Bilateral assurances, bilateral agreements in U.S.-North Korea case simply do not work. That's the thing we've seen with agreed framework, which broke down when the administration have changed. The same happened with the six-party talks joint statement because of the bilateral issues. Unfortunately, we see many examples like, working out of certain agreements and certain arrangement that do not give any hope to North Koreans that any kind of their agreement, even a written one with the United States, will hold water after the change of administration, or if some new facts would arise, like the human rights issue or other issues in North Korea. So these guarantees can always be withdrawn. So we are speaking about the need for multilateral guarantees, not only of desire to get Russia in this process, but also because it's simply more practical to have a number of countries, a number of power centers, actors who would support, monitor, and control the implementation of these agreements. One example may be the Iran deal, the JCPOA, Joint Plan of Action. U.S. walked out of this deal, but did it collapse? So far, no. Iranians are still keeping their part of the deal, although they threaten every day to withdraw. But still, so far, participation of other countries like Russia, China, and European countries, it kept this deal, this arrangement afloat. So the power of other actors being involved is maybe not decisive, but it's important. I think that in Korean case, 6 countries, China, US, China, Russia, Japan, and the 2 Koreas should be involved, and UN should also play some role as a guarantor, as a keeper of the agreements. And there could be different forms. There could be a sort of multilateral legally binding agreements, or starting from declaration. Me personally, I think that the most useful form would be a set of bilateral agreements between each country and the other 5 members of the 6th party, which would determine its legal obligations with respect to keeping Korean security. That could be a very different agreement. For example, in U.S.-South Korea case, it's just the reinstatement of the existing treaty. In North Korean U.S. case, it's a very lengthy document, but this is what can be monitored, and in this way, other countries can control what the opponents are doing. In the case of breach of the agreement, they could use their combined power to oppose this. This is how I see it. Of course, first, there should be bilateral agreements. And by the way, this is what President Putin said in the press conference after his meeting, that before we move to any kind of multilateral format, US and North Korea must sort out the issues that separate them. Only after that, there could be multilateral agreement. But that doesn't preclude us from discussing this issue in advance. I believe that the community, of the expert community of all these countries, of all our countries, should busy themselves with doing like that. In the first track, during the 6 party talks, the parties have succeeded in developing, in the framework of Working Group for Peace and Security in Northeast Asia, a sort of a basic document with the principles of how the security should be kept. It's a very general document, but this is a start. And I think if first the experts, maybe then 1.5 track, could elaborate on this and give to everybody the idea of just how this system might look like. And this is, first of all, important for North Koreans, because they would know how they can be guaranteed if they give up or seriously diminish their nuclear potential. I think it could be a very good supportive mechanism for the progress of the most important U.S. North Korean track.
Thank you, Tom.
Hi, Sean King at Park Strategies. It was the Soviet Union who put Kim Il-sung in power in North Korea. It was Stalin who signed off on the Korean War. And people say that North Korea modeled its own gulag system on Stalin's. Is there any regret or remorse among ordinary Russians today over what North Korea is today in the 21st century? Thank you.
You touch a very nerve of the current, well, I wouldn't say discussion, but opposing polar opinion in Russian society, because there are quite a number of people, and not only people of old age, but also some quite young radicals, who said that Stalin was the greatest ruler in the Russian history, that he established the greatest empire, and although there were shortcomings like a gulag system, but anyway, he was an effective manager who got to the goal he set. Of course, majority of people do not agree to that. They may be nostalgic. They may be not happy with what's going on today in the very divisive Russian capitalist economy. But they understand that this system is much better for ordinary men, for humanity as a whole, than the Stalin Gulag system. And that's how they also approach North Korea. There is a number of people in Russia. They said that North Koreans doing the right thing. They oppose the American imperialists, and they're fighting for their existence without thinking about any kind of negative consequences for them, and that's what Russia should do. I hope this won't ever become a mainstream or any kind of important opinion, but well, still there is a tendency like this. Majority of the people, however, of course, despise North Korean non-democratic system, the repressive regime, and they mock at the North Koreans' absence of efficient economic performance and the slave-like composition of North Korean society. So I hope I answered your question more or less. And
Georgy, I mean, some of it, to push it a little bit in a different direction, for contemporary Russia, the eye on the prize is South Korea. And it's South Korea since the normalization of relations and the interpenetration of the markets, the exchange, which is very active between Russia and South Korea. And one just needs to go into Russian market now to see, made in South Korea products, very popular now, very fashionable. And that the idea of being responsive to Moon Jae-in, the idea of that bigger economic prize, Russia knows the winner of the battle and the war, which is South Korea, and sees also with concern North Korean nuclear and missile development. They don't want that capability on their border, yes, and also the idea of political tumult or whatnot. So the idea of a stable Korean peninsula from Russia's view, could you kind of couch it in a broader context of the tilt toward Asia, which has been something that Putin in the last few years seems to have been more active in embracing, and the rationale behind that.
Well, speaking about South Korea, way back in 1990s when we just established relations, there was some mood in Russian society that, well, Koreans, South Koreans, should be a model for us. The country was very poor. Then it's over the lifetime of one generation, it developed into a vibrant market economy, and that's what Russia should emulate. Now, well, everybody understands that South Korea or Japan, this is a shining example, but not a model. Russians are not Koreans, and this is the principal reason why we can't go the same way. And there's a generally very good feeling, positive feeling about South Korea, starting from South Korean products to K-pop. And there is also the sort of pity to Korean people because the country is divided. However, paradoxically, regardless of what you hear from many Russians that they're concerned with North Korean nuclear weapons across the border, most of them privately will say, if it were not for nuclear weapons, there might have been a war there. There might have been war at our doorstep, which would also concern us. So maybe it's better to keep this way, not to let North Korea will develop nuclear weapons, but keep the stability, just as it is. That's not also the majority view, because, well, if you ask the men in the street, do you want North Korea to be unified? They probably yes, that would be a good country. Like almost size of Japan and economically developed. But if you start to asking questions, how can this happen and what can be the sequence of events, it becomes understandable that if you think about it a little bit in a deeper way, you see that it cannot happen in a friendly and peaceful manner. And that could be a great disaster, not only for Korean people, but also for the neighboring Russian territories. In fact, I think that Russians do not would like to see North Korea change, but would like to happen this in a peaceful manner, and then Korea be unified, but in a normal and peaceful manner, which is not possible quite now.
Tom?
Thanks, Professor Toloraya. Tom Byrne, Korea Society. When Kim Jong-un met Putin recently, did he express any interest in joining the Eurasia Economic Union? And was Russia ever interested in having Korea join North Korea, the Eurasia Economic Union? Kyrgyz Republic joined, of course. Kazakhstan is a founding member. Did that ever come up? I could see North Korea benefiting, perhaps in terms of a greater labor mobility, sending workers up to Russia.
In fact, North Koreans, they expressed their interest in not in joining but cooperation with the Eurasian Union. But I don't know anything about this issue being discussed now, because North Koreans is a country which just cannot participate in the kind of activities this custom union and economic union is built for. For one thing, they're now sanctioned, and so how can a sanctioned country be a part of this free trade system? For the second thing, even they were not sanctioned, their system still is very far from which can be integrated into this custom and economic integration union, which is all about free movements of goods, free movement of capitals, of people, etc., etc. There were also some ideas about North Korea joining the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. With the situation which is nowadays, I don't think this is a good idea.
I like what you have to say about this idea of Russia, China, and North Korea in sort of an interesting new trilateral scheme, because, of course, when we think back to the Cold War period, it was one where there was a real Soviet Chinese split, and that was one that North Korea exploited. But this seems like a rather new format.
There's a score of geopolitical scientists who cite this as an example of ocean powers against continental powers, triangles. There is history when North Korea was on the first in Chinese, then in Russian area of influence. And there is reality where there's difference of goals and understanding of what's going on in Korean Peninsula. And of course, Russia, China views are much closer to that of North Korea than US and Japan. And with South Korea being the ally of the United States, you cannot really expect South Korea to join the same platform of ideas that Russia and China shares. Technically speaking, I think it's very much important that China and Russia has the ability, some kind of mechanism to jointly formulate ideas with North Koreans and discuss it with them, and to provide the synergy for cooperation, not to make North Koreans to extremists, and to also to deliver their joint combined opinion to the U.S., Japan, South Korea side. Well, this is the reality that we have this 3+3 formula, but it's not built. It's no longer based on ideological factors, but more on the political and security interests of all the countries.
It seems to work if you have the current Seoul administration, right, the Moon administration, which does have some tendencies that would be more in line with Beijing and Moscow on some of this, and also the coordination with the United States. And you rightly pointed out that there has been a lot of senior level cooperation. Special Representative Began was in Moscow right before this meeting that took place between the Russian and North Korean leaders. So as long as there's that component, I wonder, in the interest of confidence building and the rest, if there isn't some good potential there, not just a squaring off of geopolitical powers, but some actual confidence building that could be sowed, demilitarization lessons, cooperation on space launch, or something like that takes away the imminent threat that people might perceive of a North Korean launch or a return to more hostile behavior.
Yeah, now that you mention it, yes, that's what I wanted to say, that there could be new lines of cooperation above these lines of separation. And one of the most important issues to my mind is the denuclearization process. Because Russia and US possess the unique experience on the not exactly denuclearization, but arm reduction and arm limitation process, which was held for decades. And if we are serious about the North Korean denuclearization, which will continue also for decades, and will continue, to my mind, it can continue only in the form of arms controls, arm reductions, limitation, arm reductions, then this joint experience of Russia and US may be useful. And this is maybe one of the examples that not only this 3+3 formula should exist, but it can be combined with other formats on separate tracks, in separate areas.
Please.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Jay Park. I work for a Korean American Youth Assistance Coalition, a youth organization that sends Korean high school students to Korea to study and learn more about the Korean Peninsula. I wanted to get back to Kim Jong-un's reaching out to Putin, your President Putin, and I look at some of the writings that you've written in the past, and you've spoken about North Korea on the defense, so that it's going nuclear is a way to go defensive. And so in this reaching out to President Putin, do you see this as they're asking Putin, do you have our back? If things don't work out in our talks with the US, do you have our back? And where will this go? Because you had mentioned that the JPTA with Iran did not work out, and also the agreed framework, and the six-party talks, that did not work out. But outside of these agreements, in terms of North Korea's expectations or trust, or where it leans, do you think that Russia has a bigger role to play? Because this is what your talk is about and the title of your talk. And I hope that you can talk a little bit more about that.
Well, of course, North Koreans would be very happy if Russia would give more to assist it and to defend it, and to resort to something like Syrian scenario of defending North Korea, but that's not going to happen. And North Korea, especially in 2013-15, when the relations between North Korea and China was on a low after the execution of Chan Son-taek, and this sort of cooling off relation between Kim and Xi Jinping, or the absence of relations. It tried to play the Russian card, it tried to get closer to Russia, but I would tell frankly that soon North Koreans found out that there's very little Russia is prepared to give them in the sphere of defense, and in the sphere of this kind of security assistance. As I've said, Russia would certainly not send soldiers to defend North Korea against Americans and or South Koreans. This is absolutely excluded. What North Korea may count on as some kind of political backing, based on the understanding of the position of each other. In fact, that has been lacking in the previous years, when, for example, Russia supported almost all anti-North Korean resolution and measures of the UN, because there was a lack of communication between the two countries. And North Koreans do hope that their newly established contact between the leaders would help them to bring to Russian attention more of its concerns, and that Russia would be more lenient to taking these concerns into consideration. That doesn't necessarily mean that Russia will switch sides, but I would expect that Russia will be more supportive of the North Koreans' concerns and their intentions. That has been the case before.
Please, Henri.
Hello, thank you very much for the talk. Henry Farron with the Center for Korean Legal Studies at Columbia Law School. I wanted to know your view on how the situation on the Korean Peninsula is affecting, or whether there is any relation with talks on a Japan-Russia peace treaty, insofar as some analysts had suggested that Japan, in fear of being passed upon and in fear of being isolated, had started to engage North Korea more and had started to engage Russia a little bit more. To my knowledge, right now, the talks have died down a little bit, but just recently, Abe has again reiterated that he was ready to meet Kim Jong-un unconditionally. So do you expect any movement on that side? Or what dynamic do you see at work here? Thank you.
Well, I never really thought about that, but Russian-North Korean relations is one of the factors which very much concerns Japan, actually. I believe that even more than it deserves. The Japanese policies of trying to build bridges to Russia are mostly, I think, based on the fear of China. They're trying to, not to let the Russia-Chinese alliance be of anti-Japanese, become an anti-Japanese enterprise. And in case of Korea, is just, I think, secondary. However, at the same time, Japanese very sensitive, and I think are very much excited that Japan is left out of the circuit of discussions on Korean issue, which they think are vital for their security. Immediately after the meeting, I saw several articles and several opinions that Japan should drop its support of maximum pressure campaign, because otherwise it would be let out of the possible arrangement in Korean Peninsula. So obviously Japan reacts to Russia-North Korean rapprochement, but at the same time I cannot see how it might influence the peace treaty process, the peace treaty talks. It, of course, in Japanese eyes, this Russia-North Korean cooperation could make a Russian position stronger in Northeast Asia. However, that wouldn't necessarily translate into more receptiveness of Japanese side in this Russia-Japanese talks process.
Georgy, before President Tom Byrne rejoins us on the stage, I just wanted to offer my personal thanks to you. You've really done us a great service today, 2 hours with the United Nations, an hour with us here, and we really appreciate this time with you. I first visited Russia and have been going consistently since 1995. It's been almost 25 years now, and first lectured at the Russian Diplomatic Academy and was at a Carnegie Moscow event that focused on demilitarization. And I often think back to the lessons of that conference when I think about North Korea and the Korean Peninsula and the challenges ahead in demilitarization. But I also think back to the Diplomatic Academy and a number of your colleagues there and thought Russia really is a brain trust that is not accessed enough by the international community. And given your historical and cultural interactions on the Korean Peninsula, given the skills of your diplomatic service, that it behooves us all. And I know that Special Representative Beacon and his approach to Moscow and many other U.S. officials have appreciated the interaction with their Russian counterparts. And as you say, it's a hopeful part of our bilateral relationship and seems to be very much responsive to what Seoul is looking for now. So thank you for that, and we hope to continue to feature Russian voices here at the Korea Society, among others, when exploring international dynamics in the Korean Peninsula. And another round of applause for Professor Toloraya.